Hello.
Hi, everybody.
So welcome, Saul Perlmutter, 2011 Nobel laureate in physics, and welcome everybody from all over Latin America and the Caribbean. It's simply so exciting to have everybody together. An enormous amount of work has gone into reaching this point with the various academies of sciences in the different countries selecting you, and congratulations on being selected, and thank you to them for selecting you, and thank you for being here. So this is your chance to chat with Saul about this broad theme, United by Science, how to make scientists most effective, how to make science most effective. Actually, Saul, everybody's introducing where they come from, but where are you sitting now? Tell us.
So I'm here in my home in Berkeley, California, and I usually work at the university here at the University of California, Berkeley, and at the National Laboratory, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory here in Berkeley.
Thank you. And is this your regular spot for doing Zoom calls from, where you're sitting right now?
By now, this has become the tradition for this last year or two. As you know, so if you see me in other presentations, you might recognize the background window.
Yeah, it's funny now because when one joins a call, people always say, well, "Why have you moved? What have you done? What's that new thing you've put behind you?" It's all quite intrusive, really. Yes. Okay. So, over to Luis for his question, please.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Luis Alfredo Jack Mendez, and I'm from Guatemala, and I am about to finish my undergraduate degree in physics. And here is my question. The question is, of course, for Saul and for everybody who would like to give a comment on it. The question says the following: what will be the consequences of making the profession of a teacher become one of the highest paid professions among all? Before answer the question, I would like you to see it from taking into account the following points. Notice that there are very important reasons for which of all the different works, one of the truly most important of all is the one of being a teacher. Teachers, which here means everybody who transmits ideas from one to another, form the connection between science and society because they are the chosen ones to maintain with us the set of knowledge, ideas, that we all humans have gathered with a lot of effort over time. And notice that one of the most precious things that we have with us is our set of ideas.
All right, well, let me try 2 or 3 different cuts at this. The first one is that, at least in my own country, my sense is that it's the teaching profession, especially the K through 12 teaching profession, is very underpaid, and I think that your point is very well taken. That it would make a very big difference if we were able to attract more excited role models into our teaching profession by just paying a little bit more reasonably. My second thought on this is that I think the teaching profession, if anything, is going to become more and more important over the centuries to come. If you think about the fact that we may be moving into a world in which we do not need most people to do work to build things and to construct things and to plant and to grow food, and because more and more of that can be done with fewer and fewer people. And then you need to ask, well, what is it that people really should be doing? And I think one of the things that they should be doing is inspiring each other to be able to think and to solve problems and to invent things and be creative in the world. And so not only do the teachers become important to transmit all the knowledge that we've developed so far, but they also have an important role in helping people think about how to approach new problems and how to think about how to be creative and come up with new ideas. And that's probably as important as the transmission of ideas through teaching, since nowadays you can find a lot of the information you want, in principle, on the web, if you know how to recognize high quality information from poor information. And then my only last little cautionary note is that if it became the very highest paid thing in highest paid profession, there might be a tiny bit of danger that you might start selecting people who are going into it for the money rather than into it for the the excitement of what teaching means. But I'm not worried about that yet.
And since Luis opened the door to anybody to comment, does anybody want to make a comment on it themselves? Yeah, okay, sorry. So Lucia, you did, yes? Lucia?
Hi, yes, I'm Lucia from Lima, Peru, and I'm a master's student on physics on the Pontifical University of Peru, Catholic University of Peru. Yes, I'm really interested in what teaching means, but I think I wanted to take this, I'm not sure if it's fine, but I wanted to make a comment about how's academia going, how's academia the path that it's taking right now. I'm a master's student, and I've been doing research since I was an undergraduate student, and I also have some duties as a teacher assistant at the university. How do you think the evolution of academia is going, since, for example, there are some problems, for example, for students to grow inside academia, and I think there are some other problems like it's difficult to make a publication. There are some journals that sometimes they ask for a payment to publish, and there's then the peer review that I'm quite sure that it doesn't give a payment. So I don't know. I wanted to ask you, how do you think academia is going to evolution on time, and how do you think we the students what do you think we the students can do to improve this?
Brilliant. Okay, Saul, that's fantastic. There's your question. We see Luis working on his equation back there. We'll come back to you in a minute, Luis, for a quick summary. Have to be quick. Saul, but please, if you want to work on Lucia's question, that would be great.
I think, Lucia, you're absolutely right in pointing out that it's become very difficult, I think. And now, what I don't know is, maybe it goes in cycles, and it's been difficult in the past, and it became easier, and then more difficult again. But I do think that this is one of the a harder time for many people to find their way in a academic profession, and I think that and of course it does depend a little bit on which country you're in and where you are. So occasionally I talk to friends in countries where it feels like they're actually healthy in the way that they move people forward in the academic world. But I think in many parts of the world, it's the fact that we've reached a point where the publications are oversubscribed, so it's hard to get publications in. The funding is often oversubscribed, and so people write many proposals before they get funding for any research. It does seem like it's undercutting this engine that we have in our society, where if we had a little bit more resources for that kind of work, I think it would pay back, and I think it would be make it more pleasurable to be a scientist during this period, and I think it would, and the societies would all benefit from it, because I think it's been every time we put extra resources into the research and academic world, I think it seems like it's always paid back very well.
Right, Mary.
Hi, my name is Maria Zuna. I am from Venezuela, and I am an undergraduate student on mathematics at the Central University of Venezuela. My questions are about your scientific researches. So, thanks to your discovery, we know that the universe is expanding at an accelerated rate. But this acceleration is associated to the idea that there exists a dark energy causing it. However, this dark energy, or the existence of it, has not had any experimental evidence that supports it beyond what we can see that is moving the different parts of the universe. So, but what we do know is that the universe is structured in a cosmic web. So my question is, do you really think, I mean, what do you think could be the evolution of this cosmic web in connection to the expansion process? I mean, do you think that in the future, this structure may be modified or disappear or even turn into something else?
And I should ask for clarification. When you say cosmic web, you mean the structure that we see in the filaments and galaxies of the universe?
Yes.
So
exactly. Yes.
Yeah. No. Certainly, we're definitely already. We already can see evidence of differences in how that structure formed and what it looks like. That we think reflects the different histories of the expansion that we've gotten so far. And of course, the history of that expansion is what we're attributing right now to a mixture of dark matter and dark energy as the primary drivers of that. They were fighting each other in some sense. And as you get a bigger and bigger universe, the dark matter and the mass of the universe becomes more dilute. And so the dark energy takes over, if it is in fact the dark energy. But as you say, right now we're very much open in our understanding of what is actually driving the acceleration. Dark energy, as a name, is just a placeholder for whatever it is that does it. And so it could well be that it's a property of the vacuum itself. That's will be if it turns out that Einstein's cosmological constant is what's causing the acceleration of the expansion. It could be that it's a new field that we haven't recognized before. And there are fields in physics that can be there throughout history and can cause an acceleration once the gravity becomes dilute enough. But it's also possible that it's a changing field, and that the properties of that field itself will change or has changed over time. And so it could be that we will go from acceleration perhaps to deceleration again. So right now, the big challenge, of course, is to try to figure out what tools do we have that might allow us to start homing in on this what the properties are of this, what we're calling so-called dark energy. And the best one we have right now is to try to study again in much more detail the history of that expansion. So that's the current state of play.
Thank you very much.
So Camilo.
Okay, hello everyone. This is Camilo Caballero. I am a PhD student at the University of Buenos Aires. My field is social studies of science. However, it's a very interdisciplinary field. And I am from Paraguay. In Paraguay, we are new on this whole thing about science and technology development. So I think this event is very timely with the current context of science in the world right now. The coronavirus pandemic has exposed science in a very interesting way. We now face new challenge, and this is because that's why I'm here in this event. And I would love to hear some specific concerns and wisdom or experience-based recommendations regarding the main subject of this meeting today, which is United by Science, thinking a very impact for us scientists. So I would like to focus on those subjects specific from this event from Saul, and then maybe so we need to hear him and then make some contextualizations of his wisdom. That's it. Thank you.
So I'd be curious to hear what other people are thinking as well as yourself, Camilo. My personal impression is that it's been a fascinating a few years. The pandemic. If we're not so sad, to see people hurt by it, it would be an amazing moment to watch what happens when a whole globe depends so much on understanding science and all the ups and downs that happen, because in some ways we did very well. In other ways, I think we've exposed some really big weaknesses in how our interaction between the scientific process and the public perception of science works. So for me, I think that it's one of the big challenges of our time right now is to ask, how do we do a better job getting a global brain? The fact that we're living in an interconnected world of people, sharing their ideas and their knowledge with each other so easily. How do we get that interconnected thinking process to be better at tracking what we really know about the facts at any given moment, what we know about the probabilistic nature of the facts, that some things we know stronger than others, better than others. And then how do we weave that together with people's needs to bring their values and their fears and their goals into the picture? Because it's not good enough just to have the facts established or not established. You also need to figure out how do you combine that well with everybody's different concerns and fears and values. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges of our time. But in some sense, I think it's a great challenge. It's one that if we can do a good job on that, I think it'll stand us well for a millennium.
Thank you, Saul. Patricia, you wanted to come in, and I noticed Bruno, you did too, but Patricia first.
Well, hello, my name is Patricia and I'm from Bolivia. I'm an undergraduate student of physics in the university, major University of San Andres. So here I go. My question is in two parts, and the second one is directly related to what the previous commenter has said. So here I go. And it's a very complex question, so bear with me. It's worth it, trust me. Well, here I go. First, if we're talking about how to make the most of science and scientists, it's inevitable to ask the question of what makes a good scientist. This is this person who makes great science. And there are two ways to look at this. The first one is usually the qualities that we associate with a good scientist. And this is capacity for abstraction, the mastery of their field, creative problem solving and dedication. But maybe there are other qualities that we are overlooking, like the ability to collaborate and work as a group, or the perseverance with difficult problems. So the first part of my question is, what other characteristics do you think make for a good scientist that we may have overlooked in history? The second part, which is related to the comment, is this. What if we understand a good scientist in a moral point of view, some member of society? What are his or her responsibilities? So one could argue that a good scientist is one who communicates better with the public, makes them aware of the problems they face, which is very important in any democratic society, for example. And should these good scientists have to plan the direction in which science should develop? This is the interest of the groups and financing in terms of what society needs. So the second part of the question is it time that scientists take a more active job, not only informing the public in the decisions they make, but also adequating the development of science itself to the needs of humanity? This is the perceived needs of his or her society.
Thank you for your very eloquent question. Saul, did you get them both?
Let me start answering, and then you should bring me back again to any parts I've missed. First of all, in terms of the qualities of a scientist, a camera here. There you go. The qualities of a scientist. That I think one thing that's probably really important that may have been overlooked is that, for my impression is that we shouldn't be thinking of these as the single lone hero scientist that we once thought of. That scientists work in a matrix. They work in a context of many people, and so you can't expect one person to be able to do everything well. In fact, you don't want to expect that, because then you'll miss all of the contributions that you get from people who do different parts of the story very well. And what you want is the ability of a group of the scientific culture and both on the small groups, but also in the larger scientific society, to be able to take advantage of that combination of everybody's different skills and strengths. Some people are wonderful at abstraction and mathematics, and they're terrible at communicating. Some people are wonderful at keeping their eye on the big picture of what is it we're trying to figure out, and keeping everybody focused on the curiosity that led to a problem. But they wouldn't be able to do the computer programming and the data analysis themselves. They need other people to help play that role. Some people are wonderful at building instruments and equipment. Some people are great at understanding what will happen when the groups of people try to figure things out together, and that you'll need to weave them in like an orchestra in different ways. And they're really good at doing that choreography and that conducting of a group. And then some people, I think, are really good at recognizing the relationship between the needs of the of a society at a given moment, and then the long-term curiosity-driven science that underpins so many of the best results that we get to. And you need all those together, I think, to make the story work. Now, have I answered both questions or one question?
I think you've answered the question about overlooked things from history very nicely. The second part of the question was about whether scientists should be more actively involved in shaping the future of science, if I understood that correctly, Patricia.
So I think the answer is yes, but I also feel like this is actually a combined job for our society working together. That we need, this isn't just a question for the scientists, but it's not a question that the scientists should ignore. So for many years, I think the scientists felt that their job is to stay in their lane, not to have any strong opinions about how we interact with society and with problem solving, and leave that to the social scientists and the politicians and others. But I think I'm agreeing with you now that I don't think that's appropriate anymore. I think we actually now have to start playing a more active role in looking to see how do we engage science with all of these issues of values and goals and desires and fears that make up the parts of society. Partly because I think what we've seen in the last few years is that if we don't all pay attention to that process, and including the scientists pay attention to it, I think we lose our connection to the realities and to the more rational sides that science offers us. And because that's the part that is easy to put aside when people's fears and goals and desires are maximally in play. And so I think if we care about combining that with all the rational elements of science, then I think we actually have to play a role in helping develop that ability to weave those things together. And we, as scientists, we have to play a role with that and help that happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question, Patricia. Bruno, I'm coming to you, but Jack Rojas, you raised your hand. Do you want to follow on from what Saul was just saying? Please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, hello everyone. It's very nice to be here. My name is Jack Rojas. I am a physics undergraduate student from Quito, Ecuador. And what I wanted to follow up with Patricia's questions and Saul's answers was, it's been established that a good quality for a good scientist is to be able to collaborate with a larger group of people, right? Not only with scientists, but with society as a whole. And I wanted to go more to the point of certainly, Saul, you have faced challenges during your career in regards to collaborating and working with other people. I would like to know, now that it's been established that it's very important to collaborate, what have been some of your biggest challenges in order to collaborate properly with other scientists, and how have you been able to overcome those challenges?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because I think humans, are so complicated, right? And so as all of us know, if you want to work with other people, you will have all the pleasures of working with other people, and you will have all the difficulties of working with other people. It's wonderful. One of the best things in life for me, I think, are when a group of people are really working well together and enjoying the process. On the other hand, some of the most difficult parts of for me in my career are when people are being difficult, and when people are unhappy and angry at each other and having a hard time working with each other. So maybe it's inherent in things that you care most about are the ones where it can be most wonderful and most difficult. So I think there's that so far I don't have any magic bullet that I know always works when you want to have that collaboration work. But I think the obvious parts of the story that most of us would think of are all important. I mean, the idea that you want to be constantly thinking about how are other people feeling, what are they needing in order to be able to work well together. what makes them feel comfortable in the group, and what makes them feel like they have a path for their future. I think probably the biggest difficulties come about when people feel scared about, how are they going to be able to make a life for themselves? How are they going to be able to find a career? And it makes them less obvious that they should be generous and join in with everybody in the most generous way. So I guess, to the extent that we can build a healthy ecosystem for scientists to work where they don't feel scared and they feel like there's a reasonable route for them to go in the future, that's probably the best recipe for good collaboration that we can find.
Thank you. Lots and lots of hands raised, but Bruno, I was coming to you next.
Yes, so thank you. Well, hello, Sol. I'm Bruna. I'm from São Paulo. I'm a student, graduate student at INSPER in public policy. And my question will be a little bit of Camilo and Patricia. So I will get back to COVID and the pandemic to say that the science and research made at the time was very valuable to the world, to the society. But funding, it is still an issue, particularly in development countries or poor countries. So they are still having a great difficulty to abroad and to be more active in those roles. So my thoughts is what the government and private sector should do more to help those countries that are in development, and what should be your thoughts on how science could be mainstream and having more likability to the society in general?
Well, two different thoughts there. So let me do the second point first that you're asking about. There, my feeling is that if science teaching would be able to spend much more time teaching the ideas of how we approach the world and how we think about problems and how we look for the ways that we're making mistakes and how we try to figure out, how to keep ourselves from fooling ourselves too often, and so much of what my experience of actual doing science is that kind of structure of how to think about problems in a humble, self-critical way. All those things, I think, would help everybody day to day, that these are not necessarily tools just for science. I think they're actually helpful tools for living a life. And I think if that was more understood as being one of the functions of scientific teaching, I hope that these all over the world, it would be easier for people to recognize that they are doing science day to day, whether they want to or not, and they are just doing it better or worse. And they could actually take advantage of the fact that we've learned all these different tricks of the trade to keep ourselves honest and not to be constantly fooling ourselves by what we want the world to be like, but being available to see what the world really is like. So I think that would be one route to making it more of something that everybody shares, not just a special thing for the scientists, but something that we're all doing science, in some sense, every day. Now, on your other point, I sort of feel it's one of these huge problems of the world, is the fact that it looks to me as if everybody treats the world as if it were a resource-limited zero-sum game, that there's only a certain amount of stuff out there, and everybody should try and grab as much as they can for their own selves or their own countries. But my sense, when you look at human history, is that that's not really the world that we live in. That it's there's an amazing capacity for us to make more available and to build a world in which the more you put into it, the more people will have available to them, and that it's not that people give something up and are making big sacrifices for somebody else. You might like them to make sacrifices for, right now, it feels like there's often a poor distribution in the world that's terrible to watch. On the other hand, I don't think that that's the easiest way to get people to dive into solving the problems. I think that it would be wonderful if people understood that there's a huge amount available if we build capacities in other parts of the world. So if we were to help scientists develop in countries that don't have science funding, I think it would pay back. I think everybody, you would see a world that would just have more resources, and it would be a more of a world that's, you know, racing each other to make each other's lives better, and less of a world where people are just trying to hold on to little bits that they have. So my picture is that I think we have much more available to us than we're aware. I'd actually be curious to hear what other people think, whether that resonates at all.
Bruno, you wanted to come back with a comment.
Just to complete. Yes, just a comment. So what the government or the private sector did that you think they should do and then should continue to do during the pandemic that they didn't do before, and what the practice that they didn't do and that they should do?
Well, there's so many things in retrospect that we can see they could have been done in other ways. And of course, every different government was successful in different ways and made mistakes in different ways. So this is something where I would not want to say that I would have gotten it right if I had known, if I were there myself. But in retrospect, I do think that it would have been very important to have earlier on tried to get a representative parts of society to work together with the scientists more closely, so that it was easier for people to see what the balances were and what the decisions were that were being made, and that also they would share in the understanding that the science is a process. It's a probabilistic process where we learn more, and that it's not a matter of telling everybody this is the right answer and forever. It's this is what we think right now, and we're still trying to understand, we're racing against time to understand as fast as we can so we can save as many lives as we can. I think in retrospect, and maybe for the future, I think the job really is to try to figure out ways to get more of the public in that conversation earlier, so they can help act as the translators to the rest of the public. That this is not some magical thing that's going off in the corner. It's something that we all can understand, that we're part of this process and we're trying to figure something out together.
Thank you. This question of the world not being a zero-sum game is absolutely fascinating. Now, we've got a couple of people wanting to continue this theme. Sofia Escobar first.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sofia, and I am a physics master student from Honduras. So my question is very related with what Bruna said, but changing the view a little bit. So she said, what can the government and the industry do to get more funding and something like that? It's what I got. But my question is, what can we do as physicists in a country where the little money that it gets, because there's not a lot of funding, right? The little money that gets, it goes to solve immediate issues like health, violence, drugs, stuff like that, housing problems. So how can we tell the government, hey, please give us a little bit of funding, we can help, and not only give it to health and stuff that is very important, but how can we show them that we can be also useful for the society?
My sense is that it's interesting that problem exists in so many countries in the world, even the wealthy countries. So, I'm watching our society right now in the United States, which is about to put a large new amount of funding into technology and very applied science issues. But it's very hard to explain to them why it is that doing fundamental science is such an important part of the mix, and that in the end of the day, it's often the fundamental science that allows you to jump ahead of all the problems. Whereas if you're working your way trying to solve the immediate problem, you can't necessarily always do it in a timely way. So I think that translating that back to the situation that you're describing is I'd be as much looking for good ideas as you are for how best to tell the story. But to some extent, I think the job really is for us to try to get to know personally, as many people as possible who are needing to make these sorts of decisions, and have them start to see and experience all the ways in which that more basic fundamental approach that science allows ends up often providing ways to do things that you never otherwise would have thought of, and can help solve problems in ways that you wouldn't expect. And it's a hard one. And I think one of the things that we probably all need to do is I'd like to set up websites where we start just collecting examples, so people can understand just by example of how do these play these roles. Why is it that even something as abstract as mathematics ends up being actually one of the most efficient ways to solve certain basic societal problems that you'll find around you, and you can't do it by calling in a mathematician from somewhere far, far away. You actually need people who understand these approaches locally, who are spending time learning it and teaching other people.
Thank you. This fascinating discussion. Eloisa, you wanted to come in on this.
Hi, I'm Eloisa from Brazil. I'm an undergraduate student in math, and I'm a middle school and high school teacher in STEM. And you mentioned that we need to teach people that science is much closer to us than we usually tend to think, and teach people that everyone can do science, and we almost do that every day. So in light of this, I wanted to ask you, how do you believe we should educate the next generation of scientists, and what skills are the most important for us to be teaching for kids right now?
My sense is that it's a really interesting time to make that decision, and for us to be rethinking that, because I've been watching, for example, my own daughter, as she wants to learn things. She will go onto the web and find courses and things, and little small 10-minute videos that teach concepts, and they're very good. Often the problem is that what we now need to do, if people want to take advantage of that, is we need to teach students how to be thoughtful, critical thinkers who are able to recognize what is better quality and what is worse quality on the web, and to be able to know how to find things of that sort. For me personally, I think the part of the story that's the most helpful is for people to learn how science has gotten good at recognizing its own failings, and that scientists have to be very, very well trained to look for where they're making mistakes, and that they should be meeting with other people and talking to other people because they need other people to show them where they're going wrong, not because they're trying to convince other people that they're right. And the extent to which we can teach that deep understanding of our own human frailty and all the ways in which we can fool ourselves, and that our job is to help each other by reaching out to each other and and asking for help in not making these mistakes all the time, and learning the different tools of the trade that we've picked up on how we discover that we make these kinds of mistakes and how we do better. I think that might help us then when students go and look for a new concept that they hear about, a topic in machine learning or gene editing or whatever it is that they need to understand, that they also understand how to recognize better, more thoughtful, more self-critical examples on the web, and not be fooled by people who pronounce things as if they know the answer to dead certainty.
And your team at Berkeley, Saul, is actually developing tools that people can use to do this, right?
Right. Well, part of the reason that I'm so passionate about this right now is because I've been watching. We've been trying to develop ways to do this at Berkeley for the undergraduate student body, and so I've been developing a course together with a professor of psychology, a social psychologist who's in public policy school, a professor of philosophy, and then others have joined us as well, science education, and we've been trying to get to the point where that course could be taught at many different levels. So we've been, I think it's been a pleasure to teach at the university level, and we're now trying to spread to other universities. So this year, Harvard taught the same course, and we're hoping up this coming year, 2 other universities will pick it up in the United States, another one in Germany. But we're also hoping to try to develop a high school version of the course so that people can start learning this material much younger. So it happens to be something that I'm very concerned about, and I'm hoping that we can invent ways to do this. But it's not a finished product. It's something that we're going to have to keep inventing as we go. So somebody who's actually teaching as you are, I think would might be as able to make suggestions as we are.
Collaborations born right here. Emilia Hissa, you wanted to come in on that same point. I think you had your hand up.
Yes, hi, I'm Emilia Hissa. I'm from Argentina. I'm 21 years old. It's an honor to be here, so thank you. And I study biochemistry in the National University of Córdoba, Argentina. And I was wondering what makes you so investigate about a topic that has no application today. So how do you think your findings can contribute to society? Because it's easy to answer if you are, for example, studying cure of cancer. But in your case, what motivates you to study that kind of things that have no direct impact in society?
I do sometimes joke, to people when I'm talking that I feel like if you choose something that's got to be the most impractical thing to study, it must be cosmology. Since you're talking about things that are not only billions of light years away, but billions of years back in the past or in the future. So what could possibly be less practical? But what it strikes me is how magically it appears that throughout history, when we learn something that we're interested in and that we think is intrinsically fascinating, it's part of being human, and it's part of the life of the mind that I think we all enjoy. But weirdly enough, it has this odd ability to make it possible to do things in the world that we otherwise never would be able to do. And the example I sometimes give is Einstein's theory of relativity, where the general relativity, you may be talking about things, and special relativity, you may be talking about things like what happens to clocks and time when things travel near the speed of light, and it sounds like once more, what could be less practical? We're not going to travel near the speed of light as far as we can tell. And why do we care about clocks traveling near the speed of light? And yet, somehow, magically, it's turned out that this theory, this understanding of the world, has made it possible to do things like global GPS positioning, that we're able to find where we are in the world using these network of satellites that provides us with GPS positioning. And we all have this now very practically in our pockets, in our cell phones, and we're using it every day. No matter how unrelated the topic seems to be, it does sometimes offer us a direct way to do something like general relativity and GPS. Other times, it offers us an unusual way to build structures to understand the world that then become very useful in other applications. So there are many times in which the tools of the mental tools and the mathematics that you develop end up being used in a different area. And then finally, it also focuses the needs and the desires of the mind with smart people who get very engaged and excited by it in a way that they invent new tools. And so we also end up with new actual physical capabilities because somebody really wanted to figure something very deep out about the world. But while they were doing it, they had to invent something to do it, and that became a useful tool. So we've, for example, ended up having to invent new sensors to measure distant supernova and galaxies. And those same sensors are useful for medical applications.
Saul, it was a beautiful justification. Can I just ask, in your own case, do those things play into your rationale for doing what you do, or do you really just do it because you just desperately want to know?
No, absolutely. The way that you get pulled in to something like to these projects is because of the excitement and the curiosity and the beauty of it and it pulls lots of other people in that way as well. And then by accident, you end up solving problems that the world needs. I think focusing people on very hard problems and is easiest to do perhaps if they're passionate about their curiosity about how it works. But that by itself ends up having this byproduct that it makes, I think it makes the world a more manageable, can make the world a better place.
Thank you. Patricia, I'd love to, well, a very, very quick comment, Patricia, because we must get through everybody. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. It's a comment very related to what Dr. Permuter just said, and it's about the development of the different fields. Currently, we rely heavily on guided work, whether it is a senior author directing a project or the journals, especially prestigious ones, with or without intention, they dictate much of how different fields develop. So the question is, should we continue this way of developing science, or should we have a more organic approach, maybe one that allows the exploration of tangents or the publication of negative results, for example?
I mean, my personal experience was that when I started in science, it happened to be a period here in the United States where in the physics areas, there was much more openness and flexibility and willingness to leave the scientists to follow a tangent. So we might read an article, a journal article one afternoon and think, hey, I have a good idea, and then spend a whole week working on a problem that is completely unrelated to anything that we were already being paid to work on. And that was considered good. And I think that was a very productive period. I think it led to many great ideas to be developed. I think right now we happen to be in a period where the funding wants to insist that they want to know what is every last hour being spent on, and are you sure you're doing exactly what we said you were going to be doing? And I think it's a big mistake. I think it's just not the way in which you get the best out of your scientists, even if all you're trying to be is practical.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to get everybody in. I'm sorry if I'm breaking up the order that you asked your questions in, but Pedro Tavares.
Hi, hello, Saul. Hello, everyone. My name is Pedro, and I'm an undergraduate student from Brazil. I'm majoring in molecular sciences at Universidade de São Paulo. And I believe my question deviates a little from those that came before me. Therefore, before I'm getting to it, I believe I need to provide some context. Here in Brazil, we are living under a government of President Bolsonaro, a far-right politician whose base of supporters are in general fiercely deniers of science. And when we stand in defense of our academic freedom, or in defense of the science development budget, or against policies that rely on obscurantism, we are heavily attacked. The university is being heavily attacked. Thus, we who grew up in Latin American and Caribbean countries, we tend to see science advocacy as an act that is inherently political. So my question to Saul is, do you see this intimate connection between science advocacy and political activism, or do you believe that science and politics are far apart?
I think that it's pretty clear that watching the responses, for example, to the pandemic, as a very good way to fix our minds on a problem. It was so clear how the interaction of the science and the politics made such a difference in different countries, and that countries where the science had a easy relationship with the political system, I think we're able to be much more nimble and flexible and responsive to what we learned about the science. Other countries, I think for example, my own country, here, you saw that the concerns about the politics then made it very difficult for people to just be flexibly open to what they were learning about the science. And so I think there's no way to avoid that when you see it so straightforwardly. Now, obviously, in different countries, it's I think people would have said this for years, that they would have seen it much more up close and personal for many years earlier. And it was certainly the case during the Cold War, that there was very clear differences about how science was playing with the political world. And then we see it again, in these different phases of our own history, as we're watching. I think the very hard thing from the point of view as a scientist is to figure out what do we do with that? Because obviously our work as a scientist is already complicated. It's very difficult to construct a theory, to build an experiment, to pull the collaboration together. These are very difficult jobs, and they take years of laser-like focus to make something work. And they take an obsessive amount of effort a lot of times that should be a pleasure, of course, but it's hard. And if in addition one also has to take on how are we going to solve the political problems of our country at the same time, it's hard to see how one accomplishes everything. On the other hand, I do think that historically that has been the case, that over and over again, scientists have had to play a role in trying to make the world a better place, politically as well as intellectually. And so I think that that we're forced into that role often anyway. And so I think the best we can do is try to do it with a certain kind of humble spirit, where we really try to to share that sense that what science allows us is an understanding that we are not always right, and that we want other people to understand that we're trying to help the world, but we want everybody to share in our understanding that there are things that we will be getting wrong, and that one of the things we contribute to the political world is a openness and a willingness to listen, and that we want to model it so that other people might listen and to each other as well. And so I think that it's sort of an unusual element of our role in politics, which I think may be one of the most important ones we can contribute, even though in some ways it's sort of leading with our weakness in an interesting way.
Camilo, did you want to come in on this?
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is what we came for, to listen to this kind of recommendation. So following the previous speakers, I think here we're talking about a science as a culture and a social institution. And I see, well, personally, I see a lack of these considerations, talking about the good scientists and the relation with policymakers, lack of consideration of this dimension of science in science communication, science dissemination. So this is something I want to consider here between you. So what do you think about this shift in the way of presenting science to the public? You previously mentioned science public perception. This is something strategic we have to consider. And another thing I want to put in consideration is that Latin America has had Nobel laureates in decades before. In the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, we had Nobel laureates, but in the 90s and in the 2000s, we are lacking of them. And this is in coincidence with a process of the science in an international context, where Latin America remains as there's a concept called peripheral modernity, considering the science and technology in science in Latin America. So it's very interesting to see that all of you have these things aware in your interventions, but I would like to see more this thing to the public without fear, because talking science as a culture and as an institution, it has to coexist with others in the world. And there are other cultures and other institutions that are enemies of the science and the scientific culture. I'm talking about what happened to Galilei 2,000 years ago, and what's happening today in a more subtle and more refined way. So we scientists should be aware of this in every day when we talk to our colleagues, when we talk to our family, when we talk to our friends. We have to disseminate science as a culture and as an institution. This is what I want to consider following the previous speaker. Thank you very much.
And if I could add in, you should tell me whether this would be helpful. My sense is that that science culture also has a long tradition of international shared international culture. And so the tradition in which the scientists look for each other in different parts of the world and try to bring each other in and want to talk to each other across all the boundaries that exist in the world. That's also an important role that the scientific culture has played, and helped us recognize a certain common humanity in a way that I think that there aren't that many other. I mean, maybe the culture of music is the other one that comes to mind. But I think those two can play a very, very important role, and scientists then have a possibility of helping to back each other up when it's difficult in one country, that the scientists in another country can look out for them.
Okay. Lucia Cole, you wanted to just come in briefly, very brief.
Yes, so I wanted to make a comment on politics and science here in Latin America. Here in Peru, I have got to the conclusion that the government is against science. One of the principal ideas in here is that Peruvian government had fight COVID in a way that wasn't recommended by scientists, and all the epidemiologists and biologists and all Peruvian scientists were asking the government to change the politics of fighting the pandemic, but it didn't work. So I think there has started a movement of scientists on social media talking about science, trying to communicate in a better way science. But we're in a very poor country where most of the population doesn't have access to social media or even internet. So the communications is always from TV, and there are a lot of fake news and pseudoscience in there. So my question is, what can we scientists do to improve this, to fight this? I mean, do we need to work with politics, with the government, or is it better, do you think it's better if we work from our own, from science associations or something like that? Because fighting with the government, sometimes it's hard.
I mean, I should begin by commenting that I only have my own personal experience in the particular combinations of situations that I've seen, around me, and so I would never want to give anybody else, advice where you would probably know even better than I would about what will work and not work locally. But I will say that in the United States, even in recent years, we've seen what looked like an echo of that same description of what you're saying, for example, the response to the pandemic. And here I think the scientists have concluded that the best you can do is everything. that essentially all you can do is say, well, we have to keep trying to work with the government and try to help them understand why, even for all their own interests, they care about a scientific approach. But we also have to work as educators and try to help the public understand whatever the government is doing. The public should understand what they need to know, and how to think about problems, and how to judge what they're hearing. And I think so all we can do is try as many things as we can, and it may be that 1 year, 1 decade, this will work, and another year, another decade, that will work. But I think that we don't have any choice to give up, right? I think we just have to do it, because that's, we're the ones who I think recognize this need, and we have to try to offer something. I'll be curious, by the way, since we've been trying to figure out how do we develop this course for high school students to be taught in different parts of the world, I'd be curious to know about in parts of the world where there is not easy access to the internet, whether or not, if we made things available to teachers on the internet, whether they would be able to download things and print them out, or what would be the most useful ways to have that material available to them?
Well, I think right now in the pandemics, teachers got the information, yes, from internet. So in the countryside of Peru, teachers went, sometimes there isn't internet connection, even though in small towns, so they have to go to bigger towns or cities. They got an internet connection, download the material and take them to the towns, or they use the radio. There has been a TV program that became a radio program too, called Learning in Home, that it was for educating kids in school. And yeah, but it is actually here in Peru, it's really difficult because of all the mountains. People have to walk hours to get the radio signal or internet signal, but it had worked. Like in the bigger image, it worked. So yeah, downloading the information and having radio programs, it's a good idea. I think it had worked. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. That's helpful to know.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I must let other people comment though, Camilo. So, Cristina Giraldo, please. I will come to everyone.
Hi, thanks. My name is Cristina Giraldo. I am a doctoral studying in automatical engineering at the National University of Colombia. My question is very different. Yes. How do you see climate change in tropical countries, for example, in Colombia? Science studies show great effects in temperature latitudes. What should be the role that science and technology should play in Colombia, in Latin American countries, and elsewhere the world in this regard?
I mean, obviously, once more, I'm looking to you for your expertise in the local context of to some extent, but I will say that the climate change story is it's another one, just like the pandemic, where I think it becomes very visible to us that our job as scientists is to teach as best we can how to think about very complex, difficult problems with humility, with the idea that we have to keep learning, and that we've learned and that doesn't mean that we can't act on what we already know, but that it means that we explain to people that this is our best knowledge, and that if we work with our best knowledge, that's the only thing we can do. That we have to work with our understanding of what we know today, and we may update it. There may be things that we will learn that will suggest that we should respond a little bit differently here, a little bit differently there. But our best knowledge now is that we have a upcoming crisis, and that we do need to be ready to work on the carbon footprints, in the world, and we need to be ready to work on the mitigation strategies for what's going to happen, as there will be some climate change already, and that we want the public to feel engaged, that they're part of this process, that they are as interested as we are in everything we learn and how we respond and everything we invent that might allow us to save the situation.
Thank you, Saul.
Thanks.
So let's go to Mexico. Julio Aurelio, you dropped out, you came back. Well done for getting back in.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Julio Aurelio Sarabia Alonso from the National Institute for Astrophysics, Optics, and Electronics in AOE at Mexico. I am a physics PhD student, so I have two comments or two questions. The first one is, nowadays the work of researchers implies not only work in the laboratories and in the classroom, but also times for scientific dissemination, writing articles, the famous papers, and getting financial support to carry out our research. My question is how to deal with all these activities of profession and with our personal and family life, because I think the answer is not trivial.
For me, I've always felt that you do your best work when you're working in a surrounding personal environment that's rich and full of many friends and family and activities that are not your science per se, and that I personally I like playing music, so I might go and play with an orchestra. I might like going folk dancing, playing tennis. That often the way to do really interesting work in your science is to have something else that takes your brain completely away from your scientific concerns, and it gives it a chance to refresh and come back with some new ideas. And so I do think that a balanced life which is rich and warm and full of other aspects is actually an important part of being a good scientist, and that it's there may be differences. Some people may be able to do it absolutely focused all the time, but that's not my personal experience. I think I need that balance of being able to step in and out of the work. It's funny because I would say that the pandemic has made that even more visible, in some ways, because for many of us, we're hidden inside the house for so much more time that it's and you become very much aware of the parts of a richer, fuller life that you're not experiencing, and that you can see where it's not actually helping.
And how about surmounting difficulties? So when my sense is that almost every human life I know of is a mixture of periods where you can be focusing on one aspect of things because other things are going fine, and then something always goes wrong, right? There's always something going on in the world around you. It could be as trivial as you're spending the whole day fixing repairing a car or a house, or something like that, or as profound as watching a loved one have health problems and having to support friends and family when they're in need. And I think that is what makes up a life. And so I think science doesn't remove you from it. Science is just part of that mix, and you can't expect that you will always be doing nothing but your science work. Some weeks, some years, it'll be highly broken up with other crises and or excitements in life. You have a child and there's a newborn baby at home, and that's one of the great reasons not to be going into the lab that day. I think a full life is part of the story in all of its ups and all of its downs. Thank you, Saul. But let's stay in Mexico, Raimundo.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, it's good to hear from Saul about that we have to try to maintain different lives that is not regarded to science. Yeah, because I think sometimes when you are a physics student, you get stuck in what you're doing, so you forget that part of the creative process is to have other approaches or activities to solve them. But that's something I want to say. But I have two questions. One is related to the climate change crisis that we're going to face, that we are facing right now, but it's going to get worse in the future. Is that based on what we have learned in the coronavirus pandemic, what should be our task as scientists for the solve of the climate crisis? Another question is the other one is related to physics. Is that if Saul thinks that someday we're going to unravel all the mysteries of the universe, and how would a such thing look like?
All right, let me begin on the second question first, and what's fascinating is that we have human brains that evolved to work in this relatively simple context around us. And then we use that brain to try to understand things that are so different in their feel from the immediate world around us. So the fact that we can understand, these bizarre things like relativity and quantum mechanics in physics, where the world apparently does surprising, shocking things that our brains are just not very well designed to accept. And yet, somehow we've learned enough how to use abstractions and how to use mathematics and how to use other thinking tools that we can understand it. But I'm always aware of the fact that nobody guarantees that those tools will be good enough to understand everything. And so I don't think we get any, we can promise that if we stick to it long enough, eventually we'll understand everything in the world. Maybe there'll be some things that we're just not well built to do. I'm hopeful that for a little while we'll do even better by using a combination of computers and artificial intelligence to help us navigate those more complex parts of the understanding of the world that our brains aren't good at. But even so, we don't know whether that will be good enough. So for me, it's a big mystery, and I think it's amazing how far we've come. And I think there's a lot more we can do. I think there's huge amounts that we can understand and learn. But I have no idea whether in the end we'll stop back and say, okay, I think we've got everything now, or whether there'll always be something left. But we have a lot to go. I think we have a huge amount of room to still learn and work and learn how to do things in the world as well. So that leaves me very optimistic. And then the first question
was climate change, I think, again.
I mean, my sense of on the climate change story is that in some sense we now have a huge challenge as scientists, which is to try, and I think the pandemic showed it as well. We have to try to start being creative and thoughtful about how do we engage the science with the public concerns, and that it's not good enough to just tell the public, we know the answer. Here's all the facts that we know, because there's all sorts of difficult values that have to be decided. People have to decide, when do we give up the use of this resource and move to that resource, and who's going to be hurt and who's going to benefit from it. And so it's a big, complex problem that we need to work with the public as scientists, not telling the public that we know the answers, because it's a mixture of facts and values and priorities and goals. If we ended up having to do geoengineering to help solve the problem, that's going to take a large sense of coherent, good trust of the people to each other, that we are going to try something and we will manage it well. And so I think that our job then is really to work very hard on asking, how do we get a better conversation going between the members of society and have them use science in that conversation in a productive way. I think we're forced into working on that, and I hope other people help us. That it's not just the scientists that are trying to solve that problem.
Thank you, Vicente.
Well, nice to meet you, Saul. I am Vicente Navarro from Panama. I am an electromechanical engineer doing a master's degree in applied maths. I would like to hear some experience from an expert who deals with the unknown that more than myself, about how to face the uncertainty and the fears in the research work, and how to overcome it to fulfill the goals. In addition, I have another question, or another ask. How can we make science a place where adults, youth, and children meet to learn from each other and exchange ideas?
So my sense is that any really good scientific problem is challenging enough that there will be some point in the work where it will not be obvious that you're going to get there. That there'll be some point where it looks like things are going wrong, where one way or the other things are just not working out. And what's so so tricky as a scientist is that part of our job is to be optimistic about our work. Part of our job is to be able to say, okay, that didn't work. There's got to be another way to make it work, and to be able to bounce back and do that well enough, even though some problems you might have to recognize we're not ready to go ahead with. So it's a very tricky balance, right? Because you have to be able to keep yourself focused and keep yourself trying, and with a sense of excitement and optimism, way beyond any ordinary human experience. Because science is hard, and yet you have to know that some problems, maybe that's the wrong time. We're not ready to do it yet, and you have to be able to step back from that problem, and not keep hitting your head against the wall. And that's a very tricky balance. I think this is one of the reasons, actually, I think why working with other scientists together can make a very big difference. So that a group of people can help each other stay honest, and they can help each other stay excited. So they can keep bouncing off each other good ideas if there's a problem, or if they've all done that, as far as they possibly can, they could come to a conclusion together that none of us see any way to move forward. Maybe this is the time to work on a different problem, and I think that balance is something that's maybe easier to do with other people around, helping each other. So that's my thought on that. But I do think that when I'm teaching this course that we're trying to develop to teach scientific thinking, one of the topics that we teach is what I call scientific optimism, and that scientists have to be willing to believe that they can solve a problem much longer than almost anybody would be reasonable would be reasonable for anybody else, because scientific problems take a lot of persistence and willingness for something to go wrong, and then to try and recover and say, okay, that didn't work. Let's figure out a different way to do it. So I consider that to be part of teaching science as well, as the actual content. Now, your other question that you were asking, I do think that as part of education, I would love if we had the students learn enough that they want to go and have questions to go back to talk to their families about. And I think that would be fascinating if part of every project had a section where when the students have something that they think is interesting, that they are asked to bounce it off of their family and friends and parents and others, as a way of tying together the generations in these problems that we're trying to teach people how to approach as in the scientific way. So much of it is willingness to be wrong, willingness to learn something different, and you want to model that. And it would be interesting if little by little that could seep back into the parents as well.
Amazing. I think that requires a society that is full of tolerance, of love, because here in Latin America, children with a big idea sometimes it's not looking good. But I think that in our times we have a more tolerance, lovely society. I think that's very possible.
I think it's something that we really should try and see whether or not it helps. I think these are all experiments, but I think they're worthy experiments.
Thank you. So, lastly, to Nicaragua. I know other people want to comment. We might have a minute for that, but Nicaragua hasn't spoken. So, Luis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luis Alvarez. I am from Nicaragua. I am an environmental engineer. And currently, I am studying a master in business administration, and I am in industrial manager of a company that produces proteins for animal and human consumption. So my question is, in what way do you think that within, inside of the companies, the employers can promote in the employees the passion and love for the science and scientific research in order to they contribute innovative ideas that improve the profitability of the companies and mainly ideas that help or improve the communities?
No, I think that's actually a fascinating question because and of course I've not worked in a business environment myself directly, but I have friends who have as well. And my sense is that the really interesting, tricky approach in this is the question of how does one give enough openness and flexibility to people who are working in that environment, but have the employees excited and motivated enough by the goals that they want to use the flexibility in a way that actually achieves a group end that you're after. So I guess the real question is, can you model that kind of thinking where you are working with groups of people and you're showing the flexible thinking and willingness to be wrong, but asking them to help play the game and help dive in together with that degree of flexibility, so that new solutions can be found and new approaches can be invented. So I think that would be the really interesting experiment, to try to see whether that culture can be taught in that style. I think to some extent, a lot of it might have to do with modeling it from the top. If the leaders show that they're curious and they're interested in ways that they could be wrong, and that they're trying to be creative about solving it, and then they're looking for other people to play the same game with them, maybe that would be the most interesting approach to begin with. But I'd be really curious to find out how it worked, and what your experience is and can be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, it was a joy to meet you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.